I remember when I signed up for cross country in 8th grade, I went in with a pretty cocky attitude. I had been a sprinter before in track, I had made it to state in the 400, and I thought that being a sprinter would translate easily into being a distance runner. I was in for a rude awakening. I can remember the first race I ran, I thought it would be a good idea to chug a bunch of milk before the race. And you can imagine what happened. It wasn't too long before I started feeling sick, people started passing me, and I crossed the finish line in dead last. So I was the guy getting the pity clap at the end of the race. And I remember when it was over, I was sitting there thinking to myself, man, this was a lot harder than I thought it would be. And I've experienced that realization at several points in my life. I had that same realization when I was a freshman in college studying to be an engineer. I had that same realization when I was training for my first marathon. I had that same realization when I was an intern at a finance company, and the reality hit me: if I wanted to be one of the top interns in the company, I would have to make 30 to 40 phone calls every day, no excuses. Every time I've had that realization, I ask myself a question: is this really worth it? I'm sharing this because we all go through a struggle. We all have those moments where we realize, man, what the heck did I get myself into? And we start to question, we start to doubt, we start to second guess ourselves, we start thinking about giving up. And if you're going through that right now, if you're going through a struggle, if you're thinking that something is too challenging for you to accomplish, I want to encourage you to persevere through it. It's completely normal that you feel uncomfortable. It's completely normal that you are facing a struggle, because everyone faces a struggle. And we forget about that a lot. Being in Western society, it's easy to forget that it's okay to be uncomfortable, because we're surrounded by comfort. I mean, I can walk down the street and get fast food instead of taking the time and energy to cook for myself. If I have a calc or math problem I need to solve, I can look it up on Google instead of actually learning how to solve it. And so our society has trained us to be comfortable and has trained us to avoid discomfort. But we can only be our best, we can only reach our full potential when we are uncomfortable, when we are faced with a challenge. And so if you've hit that moment where you feel like you're facing something bigger than yourself, where you're wondering what you got yourself into, that's great, because that means you are facing an exciting opportunity in front of you. Even though you're in the midst of a struggle, you can overcome it. It is perfectly normal, and you are not alone in the struggle. You know, I shared my own experience, and even if you are the most successful athlete in the world, even if you're a successful artist or musician or a successful business person, you have to go through a struggle, regardless of who you are. You know, a good example of this is take the professional marathoner Meb Keflezighi. Meb has had a lot of moments where he's been on top of the world. He's had a lot of moments where he's been stuck in the valley and in the midst of the struggle. A few examples of this. In 2004, in only his 4th marathon, Meb walks away from the Athens Olympics with a silver medal in the marathon. He's on top of the world right there. Fast forward 4 years, and in 2008 in the Olympic trials, Meb breaks his hip during the race, doesn't make the team, and on top of that, one of his training partners dies of a heart attack during the race. That's a moment where he's in the valley. Fast forward to the next year. In 2009, Meb wins the New York Marathon and he's back on top. And then at the London Olympics in 2012, Meb gets off to a poor start, tries to make a comeback and finishes 4th, which is the worst place you can finish because you're the first person to not get a medal. So he's back down in the valley. Then in 2014, Meb wins the Boston Marathon, which was a big deal because it was a year after the Boston bombings. Meb was the first American citizen in over 30 years to win the Boston Marathon, so he's back on top. And then at the Rio Olympics in 2016, Meb fades from the leaders early on. He doesn't even finish in the top 30, and he trips and face plants right in front of the finish line. You know, and that's a guy who's a 4-time Olympian. And even Meb has had those moments where he's struggled. He's had those moments where he's been in the valley, where he's probably had to ask himself, is this worth continuing? Is this worthwhile to persevere in? And so I want to encourage you, if you're stuck in the valley and it's dark and you can't see the light at the other end, I want to encourage you. It is perfectly normal that you are struggling. You are not alone, and you will overcome it. All you have to do is persevere through it, just like Meb did. Because when we are in the valley, that is exactly what we have to get through to get back to the top of the mountain. So persevere through it, and you will get back there.